Hello and welcome back to the Roundup by News of the Week, the show where I, Jake Whitwell, summarise and explain the news, helping you to stay informed. There was a lot of news this week covering things from Ukraine to potential cuts to welfare spending to even a new part of the immune system being found this week. Without further ado, I'll get on to the news, but you have to keep watching. In news on policy change then, the BBC detailed the Chancellor is set to cut welfare spending by billions of pounds. The Treasury is reportedly lining up cuts to welfare spending and other departments in response to the high likelihood that the £9.9 billion of a headroom that was reportedly available in October after the budget is now wiped out. The OBR have said due to things like tariffs, other changes in the world and higher spending, the headroom is no longer there. Ministers have so far been coy on the subject and have said they don't want to get ahead of the OBR's forecast. I noted a minister has said cash ISAs won't be axed, but savings limits might be reduced. After a week or two of speculation over this, Emma Reynolds, a city minister, or the Treasury, has said cash ISAs help provide savings for a rainy day. The Eye has assumed this to be a sign that they are here to stay. She has, though, said she wants to build a better investment culture in Britain, in society. So in her words, so not just the 8% of people who can afford financial advice can have the opportunity to benefit. This could suggest that the amount we can put into ISAs, which is currently £20,000 a year, could be changing. It will likely be reduced. The Independent reported MPs have written to Starmer about their deep concerns over his cuts to international aid. Sarah Champion, the chairwoman for the International Development Committee, wrote to the PM with the committee to express her deep concern over the government's decision to cut international aid in favour of defence spending. In the letter, she called the cut brutal, and she said it risks Britain's soft power. She has said it will also undo years of progress in areas like healthcare, education, and sustainable development abroad. She was also keen to note that reducing aid will only lead to more instability, which will only lead to a greater necessity for defence spending increases. She is arguing really for a balance between the two. In news on other politics and political reaction, The Independent noted the UK is considering all options over the seizure of Russian assets. Former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak applied pressure to Starmer this week to Reeves over the issue of Russian assets, saying Europe must find considerably more resources for Ukraine. He said the Chancellor must go further than just using interest on the frozen assets and use the frozen assets themselves. Reeves responded, highlighting that it's actually really complex and a really difficult situation to get those frozen assets unfrozen, and then therefore she also highlighted the action the government has taken so far, like applying more sanctions to Russia last week. BBC News noted Reform UK have referred MP Rupert Lowe to the police. The Reform UK MP has been suspended by the party after it's been alleged he made threats of physical violence to party chair Zia Yousaf. Chief Whip Lee Anderson said the party also received allegations of bullying in Lowe's offices, and as such, a lawyer has been appointed by the party to investigate allegations of workplace bullying which have been made by 2 female employees. Lowe posted on X, formerly Twitter, and said the allegations were untrue, but that he was not surprised by them. He said he will also be seeking legal advice and that there was no credible evidence against him. He also suggested this suspension was a reaction to his past criticism of the party and Nigel Farage, and that he also sought to publicly extend an invitation for dinner with Farage, which he has said he did many times in private. Times covered bosses' protests over the Labour's Workers' Rights Bill. Business leaders have said the government has rejected almost half of its recommendations to soften the reforms, and the bill is now in a place where it creates a thicket of regulation which would undermine the government's push for growth. Their concerns centre mainly around reforms which would allow day one protections for employees and the removal of zero-hour contracts. They are saying while the government should be commended for their openness to feedback from the industry, that they'll be deep concerned that the feedback given has not resulted in meaningful change. The FSB's executive director said the ministers are now starting to run out of time to fix the bill and show they have the back of the 1 million small businesses in Britain. Telegraph The Telegraph reported on warnings from the IFS where people are at risk from an income tax raid from Reeves's debt trap. So what's actually happened here is the IFS has warned that Reeves is in danger of breaking her own debt rules, which she put in October. Therefore, the trap is one for Reeves, and this will cost tens of billions of pounds because she would have to borrow more. This means Reeves could be forced to raise taxes in order to not need to go into more debt. Sky News noted ministers have been contacted and urged to act over Hong Kong activists being targeted in the UK. Tony Chung, 23, and Carmen Lau, 30, have been dealing with threatening letters being sent to their neighbours and offering £100,000 in exchange for information about them or to take the pair to the Chinese embassy. A group of cross-party MPs and peers who are members of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China have written to security ministers calling for the Hong Kongers to be given a direct line to call in case of emergency or if they need support. With that in mind, what do you think about this situation? Let me know in the comments just down there. Also, while you're at it, go subscribe. In news on foreign policy, the Telegraph covered comments by Starmer, who said, "We won't let the US buy up Britain's defence industry." Defence company Cherming has reportedly been the subject of a potential takeover by the US. Starmer said he vowed to put Britain first every step of the way and generally praised the industry for punching above its weight globally. He said the company should be kept British as we are proud of what we do in the defence industry. Generally, these sort of things can be blocked by the government but aren't, especially towards the US. But at the moment there seems to be interest in the UK acting independently of the USA, and so maybe we will see the government using its power to block these sorts of deals this time round. Guardian detailed MPs have condemned JD Vance's comments, which they have called deeply disrespectful. You've probably heard the comments by now from JD Vance, but he seemingly characterised the potential deployment of Anglo-French troops in Ukraine as 20,000 troops from some random country which hasn't fought a war in 20 to 40 years. He said this talking up the US mineral deal, saying it would present better protection as a security guarantee. James Cartledge, the Conservative Shadow Secretary for Defence, said it's deeply disrespectful to ignore the service and sacrifice of British troops. Nigel Farage said Vance was wrong, and former Tory MP Johnny Mercer called him a clown. Kemi Badenoch, however, said she knows Vance quite well and offered him defence. She said she didn't really think he actually said that and that people were getting carried away by reporting on it. Whilst not responding to the matter directly as well, the PM's official spokesperson said Starmer is full of admiration for British troops. The Independent noted the UK and Ireland are set to announce a closer cooperation on energy. But the closer cooperation refers to energy sharing, which with an aim to increase offshore energy production. There are hopes the deal will speed up investments and the development of infrastructure in the future. As part of the summit over the issue, Ireland has announced investment in the UK worth £185.5 million, which will create more than 2,500 jobs. Now we move on to global news, and in Ukraine, The Guardian covered the USA pausing aid to Ukraine, with Poland saying allies have had no notice of the change. The USA pulled aid after the relations soured last week. Tusk, Poland's PM, said this puts Europe, Ukraine and Poland in a more difficult situation. The French PM said it shows Washington was abandoning the country under attack and accepting or desiring that the aggressor wins. He also has responsibility to replace the aid lost. The German foreign minister said the decision meant a quantum leap was needed to strengthen EU defence. A spokesperson for Starmer said the UK was still absolutely committed to ensuring a lasting peace deal in Ukraine, and that it was also engaging with its allies over the issue. Hungary's vice president, though, Viktor Orban, said the USA and Hungary shared the same stance and that a ceasefire and a peace deal was necessary as soon as possible. The Independent noted Ukraine has warned Europe is not ready to fight a new kind of war with drones and robots with Russia. He said while Ukrainians have had no choice but to keep fighting, Russia has been able to skyrocket to space in terms of its defence capabilities in the last 2 years. He also grimly compared Ukraine to a training ground for Russia. Reuters reported the EU leaders have agreed on a defence surge. New EU plans have given leaders flexibility on defence spending and meaning they can jointly borrow up to £150 billion for it. A statement agreed on by all 27 member states called on ministers to examine and accept the proposals, and in a statement, EU leaders stressed that there can be no negotiations without Ukraine being a part of it. They also vowed to continue the supply of aid to Ukraine. The Guardian noted Russia has launched huge strikes across Ukraine after the USA halted their intelligence sharing. A day after the USA stopped sharing their intelligence with Ukraine, which gave them the capability to issue advanced warnings ahead of attack. It targeted Ukraine's energy and gas infrastructure using 70 missiles and 200 attack drones. Another strike on Kharkiv injured 8 people and damaged 9 apartment buildings, and a further strike in Poltava, I think it's pronounced, injured an adult and a child. In other global news, The Times detailed Russia has sent warships to the English Channel to support what is expected to be an arms shipment coming from Syria. A sanctioned military vessel, which with armed crew were pictured in the channel this week, is the third vessel to appear there in a month, and it's expected to be transporting weapons from Syria. Two more shipments are expected to happen in the coming weeks. The Times also noted Kim Jong-un's sister has said North Korea will escalate its nuclear threat, taking aim at the USA, who she accused of hurling strategic assets to South Korea. She said the autocratic regime is seriously considering measures to escalate its actions, threatening the security of the enemy at a strategic level. The Times noted the implication is that North Korea will expand their nuclear weapon production program. This comes amid signs that 2 uranium plants have reopened and after a reactor restarted in the country. Sky News reported that chaos erupted in Parliament in Serbia as smoke grenades were thrown and MPs fought. Several Serbian MPs were injured after opposition MPs threw smoke grenades, possibly in support of protesting students outside. In News on Trends, The Guardian covered a report which revealed more than 170 mothers were killed by their sons in 15 years in the UK. The report by Femicide Census revealed looked into the deaths of more than 2,000 women in the UK and found that 170 of them were killed by their sons. Research by Professor Rachel Condry and Dr. Caroline Miles of the Unis of Oxford and Manchester found that 70% of the cases involved a perpetrator who had mental health conditions. A report by Femicide Census looked into the deaths and the rest of the 2,000 women and found that 61% of the women were killed by a current or former partner, 16% were stabbed, 27% were strangled, 17% were hit with a blunt instrument, and in 16% of cases, kicking, hitting, and stomping were used as a weapon. Also, in a quarter of those cases, multiple forms of violence were used. Violence beyond what was necessary occurred in 59% of the cases. City AM noted a report has found UK business confidence is in crisis. A report by the Adam Smith Institute, the ASI, examined the confidence of 192 businesses who collectively employ 100,000 employees and who represent the interests of multiple sectors like retail, manufacturing and finance. Only 3.8% of respondents had a high or very high confidence in the UK as a place for business. When they were asked about business confidence, to give business confidence a score from 1 to 10, the average score was 2.6, and 75% of businesses thought taxation was the leading issue, while 49% found red tape to be very significant as well. The Independent detailed data shows combustion engine sales have already peaked. Data from the IEA, the International Energy Agency, and Our World in Data showed that the sale of non-electric vehicles hit a record high in 2018 at 87.3 million cars. but that it has been falling ever since. They also found that electric cars made up 18% of all new cars sold worldwide in 2023. This was up from 14% of cars the year before. Meanwhile, sales of combustion engines fell to 62.8 million. The data showed Norway had the highest rate of electric car sales, with 9 out of 10 of new cars sold being electric. This is compared to 20% of all new cars sold being electric in the UK. The Guardian noted a study has found half the world's CO2 emissions come from 36 fossil fuel firms. Influence Map are the company behind the Carbon Majors report, which seems to cover 169 companies. Obviously, the headline number is the big stat. Companies like Saudi Aramco would be the 4th highest polluter if it was a country. Similarly, ExxonMobil is responsible for around the same emissions as Germany, which is the 9th highest polluter, putting those into country terms. 36 companies were dominated by 25 state-owned companies. 10 of those were being Chinese. Gazprom of Russia also features, so did Iran's oil company and the UAE. The Telegraph detailed Britain's sickness bill is set to take up 1/4 of income tax by 2030. The Telegraph highlighted a poll by Policy Exchange, a think tank which forecasts Britain's sickness benefits. They said the bill would rise to 100 billion by the end of the decade, or £1,500 per person. The report's author, Jean Andrew Prager, said benefit rules should be changed to encourage more people into work. And for example, one rule which they recommended should be changed was that under 30 should be excluded from eligibility for the personal independence payments, or PIPs. The Guardian detailed Keir Starmer's poll ratings have leaped after Trump withdrew support for Ukraine. With The Guardian actually covered was the opinion polls, the latest opinion polls, which have been a regular feature on NewsOfTheWeek.net and the Roundup. Starmer's personal opinion rating has risen by 10%, and the Labour Party were seen as by far the best at dealing with issues related to defence, with 30% of voters saying they would prefer Labour. This is a scarce positive for the Labour Party, who haven't enjoyed much popularity recently since taking government. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, down there. In non-political news, Sky News noted an ex-prison officer who performed sexual acts of an inmate has been jailed. Katie Evans, 26, was corrupted by an inmate while she was new to the job, according to the judge. Evans admitted misconduct and was sentenced to 21 months in prison, as the judge reflected on her case, saying it could have been higher. He looked to take into account that she was corrupted by the prisoner, that she would have difficulty in prison as an ex-prison officer, and that she was a mother, and that this could fracture relationships between her and her child. BBC News also detailed patients have been told to soil themselves at A&E. Staff at Medway Maritime Hospital in Kent told patients to soil themselves because there was no one to take them to the toilet. Their condition meant they couldn't go themselves. The patients faced waits of more than 50 hours with no access to facilities, and a warning had been issued to the hospital over the breaches of health and care regulations. The Telegraph reported Spitting Image producer Bill Dare has died after an accident abroad. Dare, 64, who worked on Spitting Image for 8 seasons and also created Dead Ringers, died on the weekend after an accident abroad. His agency said it was shocked and saddened by his passing, and expressed that their thoughts are with his wife, kids, and anyone else in his family or friends. BBC News noted scientists have discovered a new part of the immune system. Scientists in Israel discovered a part of the immune system which can recycle proteins and turn them into a chemical which is capable of killing bacteria. The study centered around the proteasome, I think I'm probably butchering that. I'll put it up on the screen. The proteasome, a structure found in every part of the body. Sky News noted a World War II bomb was defused after it forced Eurostar to shut down and caused huge travel disruption in Paris. A bomb was discovered 2 meters underground during construction work in Paris. Widespread disruption to trains, with 500 being cancelled and 600,000 people being affected. All 32 Eurostar trains were cancelled on Friday, and massive queues were pictured in France for the service. Eurostar then ran 2 trains the next day. And that concludes the news I got this week. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it informative and hopefully funny as well. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Please subscribe and like this video. I will see you next week. Bye. Have a good week.